Hello everyone, hope you're doing well. I thought we'd go over the Datamine stuff from the last few days since they did do an update to the dev server and did add a few extra things. Not as lengthy as the last set of Datamines, where there was 11 of them. This time there is only 3 so far, so we'll have to see how it goes on going forward. People have been asking me, do I think there'll be another dev server? Yeah, I think so. They'll probably do one this weekend or something. At the end of the day, we're probably a few weeks out from the update yet. They still have to announce a few things, and we definitely haven't seen all the vehicles yet, even though we've seen an absolute metric ton of them. I think this might be, apart from maybe the introduction of China dev server, this might be the biggest first dev server I've ever personally seen when it comes to just a sheer amount of vehicles added. There's just a ton of them, and also a metric ton of changes as well. It's definitely a mammoth of an update, this one. So if you want to have a look at the Datamines, there are links in the description to them. And then also, as usual, thank you to Zabby for doing these. It's always fantastic to have a look at them. So, starting off with the update to the dev server, there was 2 new vehicles which were added, which of course was the Cyclone PC-1. This was the American patrol boat in the coastal fleet. It was rank 5, 3.7. And also its stock repair cost was 5,660 SL. This thing, I mean, we had a look at it on the dev server. It didn't look very powerful. It kind of looked pretty weak actually. I can see it actually going down in BR. These large ships with no armor get killed really, really fast. Stuff like the Candid, for example, which only recently got a DM model change, so it's a lot harder to kill. Was cannon fodder for the longest time, which is why it went down in BR. The Cyclone will probably the same thing will happen to it unless it gets a DM change. The Royvalk was also added, and this was at rank 6, 10.7, but the vehicle was hidden. I was able to cheat it in using a custom hanger, but it is technically in the files, but not in the game itself. It was also labeled as a pack premium, so this is not a surprise. Because of the fact that, the decal for it was leaked about a week or 2 ago. There was also the new location text. So the San Francisco map is now called Golden Bay. It's kind of looking like it's going to be a coastal map, but I might be wrong with it. We don't know the parameters of it yet, which is, a little bit of an issue with it. They renamed one of the Votors, the Votor 2N. It is now known as the Votor 2N Late. So now both early and late variants are called the late variant. So that's obviously not going to get confusing at all. They renamed the CV90-105, got rid of the XC8 part, and then also renamed the Verrazzano, and is now the Navigatori class RN Giovanni da Verrazzano 1940. He also renamed a few bombs and modifications and stuff like that, but nothing too crazy. Basically just following along from what we saw from some of the renamings the other day. And also, the aircraft extinguishers they made available to everyone. They also added the control feature for it. I didn't get to test it because, unfortunately, custom battles still don't work on the dev server. And usually the way that I test these things is through custom battles. So I'm hoping that going forward that will be fixed. Also, they removed the weapon jettisoning feature, so I'm guessing that's going to be coming at a later date, so maybe they're just testing stuff out. It was super cool to see on the sneak peek with BVD, but I feel like a feature like that is one of those which probably isn't as high priority, so if they get everything else done, they're like, okay, let's finalize this before the next update. But it did look really, really cool to see, and for using stuff such as like the A4N, for example, with its Mavericks or with its guided bombs, if you get engaged in a dogfight, you don't want to keep those on board, so it's quite nice that you'll be able to jettison them. The Andrea Doria was no longer hidden, so they showed it. Obviously I didn't cover it on the first dev server because I knew it would be on the second one. And they changed a few ideas around the digging. They reduced the depth and increased the radius, but not to a ridiculous sense. The MQ-1 as well, which is the kind of Hellfire drone, they've changed a lot of its characteristics, so we'll have to see how that affects the thing. They've changed its max fuel weight massively, so it'll be able to go even further now compared to what it can before. Yeah, they've basically completely altered its flight model, so what you saw before is completely useless. They added a bunch of jettison data to a ton of rocket loadouts to different vehicles, so we'll have to see if it comes in this update. Hopefully it does. And the Orion and the GJ1, basically they had a copy-paste Jaguar 1B placeholder, which, you know, is pretty standard, but now they have a copy-paste MQ1 placeholder. So I would really like to see these actual models, and that's why I kind of want to see the next dev server so we can see them. But right now, that's obviously not the case. They massively reduced the Su-25's fuel consumption Omega from 1.35 to 0.87, and also some DM changes as well on the vehicle. They removed the chaff pod from the Jaguar, which isn't too much of a surprise, since it was actually it was hard crashing the game if you put it onto the vehicle, which is a super weird thing. But this was also something that happened with another loadout. I think it was on the F-104S or something, where it kind of just broke it. Then the Mirage 2000 C5, the countermeasures, they changed them from 24 large to 90 normal, so that'll be more survivable. They added back the countermeasures for the AJ37, so now there's 48 of them. Basically, you can put them on either side of the wings if you want to. I think running something like one gun and then countermeasures and then an RB24J set, that's probably the way to go with something like the AJ47. They moved around a bunch of modifications, basically because they're adding EFS modifications to stuff. So since they're adding EFS modifications, means that some other modifications move. So for example, on the H64A, they're moving the Stinger modification to rank 3, the M9L to rank 4, and the FS modification to rank 3. So they're just moving all of those things around on different vehicles. There's going to be a lot of vehicles, if you had them spaded before this update, they're going to be unspaded again because they're adding so many modifications to everything. So yeah, hope you enjoy spading things again. I'm looking at probably about 150 to 200 vehicles I'm going to have to respade, but then again, just gives me an opportunity to play a bunch of them again and see what their metas look like. The Mi-28NM, its stock 80 gems, it does have them. They have been restored, but you can only bring 4 of them instead of 8. Same with the Apaches. So the AH Mark 1 and the H64D, they now have stock 80 gems as well now, which is quite nice. The Z11WA actually got its FM sorted. Before it was using the SA342M's placeholder FM, and also they removed the RWR radar from the cockpit, which kind of sucks. The T60 actually got shell case ejection, which is quite cool, along with its new model, and looking quite nice. And also they added a ton of stuff to the Andrea Doria, changing a bunch of rates of fires on guns, or changing a bunch of speeds, I should say, changing a bunch of armor and things like that. So kind of making it a little bit, you know, more sorted, even though this is the first time we've even seen it. They changed a bunch of drag coefficients on a bunch of rounds, mainly middling rounds, so probably going from what we saw before. The AFT-09, the missile, has gone to 1200 millimeters of penetration. This will do well for that new Chinese box, which is going to run around the Make-A-Wish Mephisto. They changed it through tournament things, but nothing too crazy. It's probably to do with that new little idea that they're doing with the kind of seasons, which I think is kind of cool. You know, as I've said many times, even though in War Thunder there's a ton of stuff that I personally don't care about, it's nice to see that they add features that at least a few people care about. You know, it means that everybody gets something that they want, and I think that's the ranking challenges thing in a nutshell. They also changed some of the IRST elevation limits on certain things, such as the RP-23D and also the RP-23MLA, sorry, so basically the Russian setups. So they basically just reverted back certain changes to them, basically gave them elevation limits. And then there was another vehicle added. This was the Z10. Now this at rank 7, obviously 11.0 in RB, and the stock repair of 4,950. They added a few new menu text, but nothing too crazy. They're trying to really push some of the market stuff, but, you know, they're just kind of sorting out a bunch of, like, English things, so they're just making sure to use the right words and everything like that. They also made some new mission text for spawn selection, so UCAV 0.1 and UCAV 0.2, so it looks like stuff like the drones will not have to spawn 15 kilometers away from the battlefield. It looks like they're going to bring them a bit closer, which I think is fair, because, you know, 50 kilometers, you're going to have to spend a ton of it around the place, right? Which kind of sucks. So now, once again, after the last update of changing the Vautour 2N's name to Vautour 2N Late, now it's known as the SO4050 Vautour 2N again. So this is the non-late variant. Now all the Vautour 2Ns are finally correctly named. Looks like somebody was pissing about for about a week just to see what was going on. They also added the AKD-10. This was to the Z-10 helicopter, but unfortunately they haven't given it its proper stats yet, so it's exactly the same as the AKD-9. I'm sure in the future they'll add some more stuff. They also added some engine stuff, the WZ-8D and the Makila 1K2. I believe the Makila is the one off the helicopter, the Royvalk, and then the WZ-8D is off the Z-10. The same with the guns, so the 20mm Type 23L, pretty sure that's off the Royvalk as well, and then the AKD-10 for the Z-10 for the missile. And what's kind of interesting is, so the F-86 F-40 Premium, it's no longer hidden, and it's no longer a pack premium, and it's going to be a 8560G Premium. So it looks like they're bringing it back, just like they did stuff like the 040 MTCA. I wouldn't bother buying it though. It's in a really rough place, and it has been for a long time. They've also changed a bunch of stat card stuff. So, you know, general weights, general speeds, all that, but stat cards don't really matter. The A4E matters a little bit though. They've changed the engine model. So instead of the Pratt & Whitney J52 P8A, it's now the P6A. Don't think that should change its characteristics at all, though. It's just trying to, you know, make it sorted. There was some economy stuff. So the SU-25 in the tech tree, they've actually increased the amount of RP it costs. So instead of 180, it's going to be 220. And obviously everything else is increased on top of that. Its RP multiplier went down to, it increased to 2.2 from 2.14. And its SL multiplier also increased on top of it. Its RB stock repair cost is 7,690. There's still no look for where the SU-25 late is. Don't know if it's going to come this patch or come later, or the main differences between them. We'll have to see what goes on. The Z-19 got its modification costs lowered, because obviously the Z-10 came after it, so it was no longer an end-of-the-line vehicle. And also the Alaska, they changed its stock repair cost. They basically doubled it, which is always fun. The SL multipliers also decreased on it as well, and the backups also got more expensive. So pretty massive nerf back to the thing, unfortunately. They added some new effects, which are the fuel fire ones. I'm going to have a look at those at some point. And also, they changed a few different things. So for the MiG-21 SMT, the air brakes now no longer block countermeasures, which was one of the more interesting things from using that vehicle. Basically, you couldn't use air brakes if you had countermeasures on board, and now you'll be able to. The Kingfisher's cockpit is now considered open, which I thought it was before, but I'm guessing they've confirmed it now. And now they've changed a few other factors for a bunch of other vehicles. So they're changing a lot of smoke grenades for a lot of vehicles. This is something which has been going on for a while. And they've been either increasing the amount or increasing the amount of salvos. So just increasing survivability of these vehicles through smokes. Also, the gun pod ammo of the Chinese helicopters, they've all massively increased compared to before, so that's quite nice. And another thing to also note is they're buffing the Soviet MBTs again. So after the... God damn it. After the last Datamine with the T-72 and the T-64 getting increased amounts of armor on the front near the driver's port, one of the weak spots of the vehicle, they're also buffing the T-72B, the T-72B3M, and also the T-90A. their upper front plate composite is getting buffed. So the main one is the 60mm RHA first layer. Its kinetic energy modifier is going from 1.3 to 1.35. Everything else, the 3mm third and fifth layer and the sixth layer, is going from 8 to 14.5, and the 50mm RHA last layer is going to 1.35 from 1.3. So they're buffing the T72s and the T90 again. I'm sick of this. Stop doing this. They don't need to be buffed. They're fine vehicles. They're just not as good as the T80s. That's it. It's okay to have backup vehicles that aren't as good as the first ones. Not everything has to be chic. Not everything has to be good at the end of the day. So we'll have to see how that affects everything. The main issues with the Soviet MBTs is, of course, the weird shots you get when the rounds go in and don't do any damage. Hopefully, if this is a change to the armor, hopefully this will mean that those areas will be sorted. Another thing about them is they are probably the toughest opponents to have if you're in a stock vehicle, because they are completely designed to stop heat, which is very, very annoying. The STB1 and also the Type 74 TK, which is all of them, they added a smoke grenade salvo delay of 0.5 on it, so, it should mean that you get a proper good plumage. The WMA301, it was given the Scout UAV, so it joins all the other light tanks of having it. They changed the gear ratios on the OF40s, so we'll have to see how that affects its mobility. And the new CV9105, which will be replacing the TML, it now has its first stage auto-loaded. The delays on the replenishment have been increased, and also the actual time it takes, and the commander view is actually working as well on it. So looks like that thing's pretty much raring to go. The autoloader on that makes it very spicy. Obviously the 5-second reload, which is super nice. And the PBV302, they fixed the bug on it where the ammo racks will now decrease when ammo is consumed, which is something that wasn't there before. They changed the Alaska. They gave it 450 more crew, and also they increased its minimum crew to repair and minimum crew in general. So it should be more survivable now than it was before, but also with a much higher repair cost. And they changed a few little factors when it came to a bunch of different little increases here and there when it comes to armor, and then also HP when it comes to a bunch of naval stuff. The FS-70 has its own model now, and then the R511 has its own model that we had a look at yesterday, and the Super 530D also uses its own model as well. So it looks like they've finally put those things in, which is pretty cool. On Pradesh, the airfields and their bombing zones and AAAs and air spawns were moved, so it looks like that's still not ready to go. Maybe it will be eventually. And also, they have started changing a bunch of armor stuff. So the Mirage 2000, the 64mm glass is hidden. Doesn't mean it's gone. It's just hidden right now. And then also, the stall speed of all of the new drones is now at 18 kilometers an hour. So you'll really be able to pretty much hover in the things. There's a few modification changes on the Huey and also the Mi-24P. So just moving stuff around won't make any difference at all. And also small little pieces of armor added. So on the Skink, for example, they added a 4mm structural steel above the engine and another above the exhaust. On the M1A1HC, they added a 4mm structural steel box to the turret left side. So stuff like that. The Cyclone as well, the naval vehicle, actually has access to a track radar as well. I couldn't get it to work, so I'm guessing I'm just bad. So we'll have to see what goes on with it. And they're also starting to fix a lot of the stat card stuff and extra things about the drones. All I want to do is see the other two, see what they look like instead of, sat on just looking at the American one. But those are the changes from the last few days on the dev server. As you can see, a lot of stuff is up in the air at the moment. A lot of things are going on. There's a ton of moving parts. We'll see what goes on in a few days. Probably everything will be changed again as always. So I hope you all have a wonderful day, and I'll see you next time. I'd just like to thank Nicholas Richardson, Elove Goat, Pyman675, Winter Scientist, Merciless Reaper, Jerry Prevolt, Megadino King, Orange Tail, Teddy, John Ryman, Universe, Ambrosius McClellan, Daniel Stanton, Moxie B. Young, Uncle Bean, Sem Arslan, Derek R., Bareen, Lafouche, and Samuel Slick for supporting the channel.